Well, thank you, John, for joining us today, and good to see you again.
Yeah, thank you, Barth. Thank you for inviting me. Sure. Pleasure to be here.
As you know, right now the energy industry is facing unprecedented challenges. We have issues related to renewable energy sources, cap and trade, environmental issues, and a whole host of other technology and regulatory issues. From your perspective, what do you view as the most significant of those challenges?
Well, I think first I'd like to say that, it's probably the most exciting time. I mean, both of us been in the industry a long time, and, I always remember, back in the 90s and mid-90s, we talked about power and utilities and talked about deregulation. That was going to be the big changer, right? All this new, spurring innovation and new technology, and we all got excited. Of course, in the U.S., it really didn't pan out like many had thought, and the jury's still out, particularly here in the United States, except for Texas, maybe a little bit. But then again, you kind of look and you say, okay, the industry kind of went sleepy a little bit. Of course, it normally has regulatory and policy issues, but then climate change came along. The collision of energy and the environment really kind of sent things into a new motion, and kind of from an information technology, from a technology perspective, very exciting times. So I think there's I go back and I think about GridWise, the GridWise Alliance, and that's been around for a number of years and never really got any traction until climate change came along. So good, bad, or ugly, I think, obviously dealing with the uncertainty around climate change is something that every utility, every company is front and center. And it's the policy stuff around that, and certainly climate change. If you look at the smart grid and smart grid technologies, we probably wouldn't have, while we would be doing some of this, we wouldn't have the concerted effort, the stimulus funding, everything if it wasn't for the concerns about the environment. So, I think probably the biggest opportunity, the biggest excitement, and also the biggest uncertainty is really around the climate change and policy type aspects, and what it's going to look like. And at Microsoft, we talk about this energy ecosystem of the future. And if you look out 10, 15, 25 years, what's this going to look like? And we paint this picture, like a lot of folks do, a lot of a distributed generation, a lot of consumer involvement, kind of a disaggregation of the command and control network. Now, are we going to get there? What is that really going to look like? Well, we don't really know. It's like I think nobody knows for certain. There's a lot of policy and regulatory stuff that still needs to be decided. But I think it comes down to, from our perspective, is you got to be agile and you got to have the capabilities, to be able to adapt, right, however it comes at you. So that makes sense?
It does, very much so. As long as we're here in Washington, it probably makes sense to ask, what do you think Congress, the Obama administration, and other federal regulators can do to help Microsoft and utility companies, better tackle these challenges?
Well, I think, I think the Obama administration has done quite a bit in terms of stimulus funding and things like that. I think that has certainly is a way to jumpstart the industry. Now we need to sustain that. I think we also need to get to the point where that money really is flowing. I think there's still issues. There's tax issues with the IRS. There's a lot of agreements need to be worked out with the utilities to put that funding to work to create jobs and things like that. But I think longer term, I think the issue is about if you look across the value chain, there's certainly, we look at renewables and trying to go to zero carbon energy sources. There was a conference recently that Bill Gates spoke at. And it's kind of interesting because Bill's been involved in healthcare and agriculture and helping the poor around the world, but he's taken an interest in energy. And I had an email exchange with him back in 2006. Actually blogged about this last night about energy, and he says, "What are we doing in utilities?" Right? Well, we've come a long way since then, but certainly he's looking at, okay, well, energy and poverty is tied together. How do you make it cheaper? How do you make it sustainable? How do you get to the zero carbon type of scenario? So I think, trying to do the long-term investments where you can actually get to, the breakthroughs. So I think this thing's called energy miracles, he called it. Right. Looking for energy miracles, and he's got some initiatives that he's working on. And there's other ones, and I think his point was that you need to be able to fund and invest in the R&D, from a government, a partnership, private government partnerships to do these kinds of things. I think the other part of it is like you say, I think that's on the supply side. You get down to the consumer side, we talk about energy conservation, and that still flies in the face of most of the utility models. Why am I going to practice energy conservation when it's going to lessen my demand? We've been in a recession. We get a lot of homes that are metered, nobody's in them. So a lot of these companies are in business. They have shareholders. They have to show good returns to their investors. So I think figuring out that model of how you can maintain the viability of companies or profitability of companies, be able to keep the infrastructure on, keep the lights on from more of a public utility commission, state regulator. I think that's something that needs to be worked on and figured out to really kind of move us forward. Does that make sense?
It does. I think there's a lot of good people working on those issues right now. You mentioned earlier the stimulus grants. From your perspective, what kind of market effect are you seeing from the stimulus grants? Has any started to develop yet, or is it still premature?
We're still in the very early stages. I think that our customers that we work with, they're still hammering out the plans in terms of, the agreements with, the Obama administration, with the Department of Energy and how these will work. What kind of matching funds they're going to get from the utility commissions and things like that. So I think we're still, if you look at most of the projections, we're really starting this year in 2010 to see that, that spending that have some impact, that over the next 3 or 4 years is where it's going to take place. Now I think, a lot of the funding is going into smart metering. There's to accelerate that, but I think everybody realizes there's a lot more. You guys have done Energy Essentials, done some surveys about where the needs are and where companies are looking to invest, and we just completed one we'll publish soon. But things like distribution management, that's probably if you paint that picture of this highly disaggregated environment where you've got electric vehicles. I've always been a guy that. And I was skeptical about electric vehicles, but they're coming. You see it coming. There's a lot of investments. We're talking to the car companies. They're talking to us, and you see states and cities making investments. So it's coming, and you get to that kind of a scenario where you have electric vehicles at scale. So it's not just smart metering anymore. It's a real concerted effort where you got to apply funding to distribution management, things like that. And then the other piece of it, that's the modernization of the power delivery infrastructure of this energy ecosystem of the future. It's not just a 2-3 year stimulus funding process. It's a long-term investment that's going to go on for the next 100 years or even more.
Well, if you'll indulge me with one more question, I've noticed in some recent publications by Microsoft, you guys are taking a more visible role in the area of business intelligence for utilities. And I was wondering if you'd be willing to share some of your thoughts on that, because I see that as a growing field. No, you're right. I think, it's interesting. We talk to customers, and, we published something, a reference architecture this fall, the Smart Energy Reference Architecture, as a kind of a blueprint and for how to go about providing enterprise agility. And a lot of it's about capability, because what happened, if you look at all these things we have in motion, from the policy, the regulatory, the climate change, the stimulus funding, distribution management, with electric vehicles coming in scale, the integration of all these mass renewables, at the bulk power system level, you say, wow, how do I deal with all this, and how do I manage it, and how do I deal with all the information that's coming at me? And one of the things that our take is that, well, you don't, what you think is probably is not what you're going to know in the future. It's going to be different. Things are going to be, it's what you don't know that's going to get you. So it's not so much about having the absolute right solution. It's not, I'm going to pick this vendor and this solution is going to last me for the next 15 years. It's more about having capabilities. And so our strategy has been to, okay, we know that all this is uncertainty. And, we talk to customers. Customers they say, well, yeah, we're going to have all this information. I said, well, do you know how you want to surface it? Do you know how you want to visualize it? How can it be? And I go, well, no, we don't. We know we need to do these things. We don't know exactly what it is yet. And so our strategy is deliver the capabilities and work with our partners to do that. And so that, you're not just boxed in. You have the capability, so as the requirements change, as the business processes change because of the regulatory and the climate things and things like that, electric vehicles, they scale up or whatever,
that you have the capability to adjust and adapt. So really, we look across the value chain. We say, okay, well, we know in the plant environment we need to give a lot more information, surface a lot more information about how these plants are running from an environmental, from an operational efficiency. We're working on that, providing, and really it's a platform play, right? So, and we end up with our partners surfacing those capabilities. If you look in the energy management systems and distribution management systems, same thing, working with folks like Ariva and Itron and OSIsoft. I mean, OSIsoft has some great examples of how they surface this stuff and visualize it. Now, we show a lot of demos. Is that exactly what's going to be needed? No, probably not. I think, but as these systems get installed, and then you'll have the capability to adapt and adjust. And same thing as you get down to the customer end of it. Whether it's utilities we know we want to establish that new customer connection. We know we need to look at the information different ways and the usage and things. Exactly what it is. Well, what it is today is probably going to be different than it is tomorrow. But having the capability so you can adjust quickly is where we're headed with that.
That sounds good. Well, thank you.
Yep, thank you, Art.
Yep. Jon Arnold from Microsoft.